and thank you for joining us on the program from the National Assembly. I'm Lami Ali. Following the submission of the 2024 proposed appropriation by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to a joint session of the National Assembly, the Senate Committee on Appropriation organized a retreat for stakeholders. The retreat was attended by the leadership of the National Assembly, ministers, chief executives of agencies of governments, and other stakeholders. That is our package on the program today. I am Lami Ali. Call it a meeting of like minds. The difference in their calling as policymakers and lawmakers notwithstanding, the shared determination is to see Nigeria work.
A profound sense of gratitude that I stand before you today to welcome you to this one-day retreat on the 2024 Appropriation Bill. Following the presentation of the 2024 budget proposal by His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR to the National Assembly on the 29th of November 2023, this retreat marks a crucial phase in the legislative process required for the expeditious passage of the 2024 Appropriation Bill. On behalf of the members of the committee, we want to sincerely show our appreciation to the special guest of honor of today's occasion, the President of the Senate, His Excellency Senator Godswill Obot Akpabio, CON, for approving this brainstorming on the 2024 Appropriation Bill. As was affirmed by the President, His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR, during his presentation of the 2024 Appropriation Bill, which he tagged Budget of Renewed Hope, the proposal at the joint session of the National Assembly, this appropriation bill was prepared with the aim of achieving crucial national objectives, such as improve infrastructural development, job-enriched economic growth, macroeconomic stability, a better investment environment, enhanced human capital development, poverty reduction, and greater access to social security. This proposed appropriation bill projection for 2024 further highlights the government fiscal and monetary strategy with a special focus on defense, security, human capital development, and private sector partnership, as well as the emphasis on sustainable growth, infrastructure, and renewable energy, designed to position Nigeria as a regional leader in the global movement towards a clean and sustainable environment. In furtherance of this objective and to highlight certain specifics from the proposed appropriation bill, 2.18 trillion representing 7.9% has been allocated for the education sector, and 1.33% representing 5% was allocated to the health sector. These seemingly large allocations are in line with the aforementioned aim of human capital development. As another example, for this amount of 1.32 trillion representing 5% and 3.25 trillion representing 12% were allocated to infrastructure and defense respectively in order to foster economic stability and security. From all indications discussed thus far, the idea behind the proposed 2024 appropriation bill is to address both global and domestic challenges faced by the populace as a result of our underutilized human capital, rising poverty level, and insecurity. As we seek to not serve ourselves, but the interest of Nigeria as a whole, this interactive session is a unique opportunity for all well-meaning stakeholders to engage deeply with each other and contribute meaningfully towards shaping the economic trajectory for our great nation in the coming years. Our focus, however, must not only be on the unity of this proposal, but also their practical implementation nationwide. The essence of this deliberation today is more than just discussion on figures and allocation. It is about ensuring that every naira allocated is purposefully directed towards the project and program that will improve the lives and aspirations of every Nigerian, guarantee our economic stability and growth, and overall build a better future for generations to come. Consequently, the Committee on Appropriation and relevant committee have been mandated expeditiously to scrutinize the budget and its content in order to ensure that the value for money is achieved. That the content in line with the renewed hope agenda of the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Therefore, he assured that the input shared in this meeting shall be collated and duly considered in the efficient speedy passage of the 2024 appropriation bill. To sensitize us on effective budgetary process, our resource person, a renowned economist, Professor Ayo Teriba, will set a template for further deliberation on how to deliver improved outcome in 2024 budget. Mr. Senate President, the leadership of the Senate, my dear colleague, honorable ministers, head of agencies and parastatals, the civil society organization, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, we strongly believe that the input, contribution, submission, and presentation that will be made here today will translate into a final report on the 2024 appropriation bill for consideration and efficient passage by the National Assembly. Once again, you are welcome to this event. Thank you and God bless you.
The importance is rooted in the fact that this is another step in the 10 National Assembly's commitment to ensuring an all-inclusive budget process for the greater national good, as well as taking steps to ensure that we maintain and achieve our commitment to January to December budget cycle. I commend the zeal and foresight of the chairman and members of the Appropriations Committee to open up the 2024 budget process for stakeholders' engagement and feedback through this one-day retreat. I'm aware that the stakeholders gathered here today and the business of making sacrifices on behalf of the people and committed to brainstorming, researching, and preferring various suggestions and solutions on behalf of the Nigerian populace. To this extent, I'm confident that such continuous partnership and deliberations will add substantial value to our legislative work of enacting laws for good governance and the interests of our people. I will specifically commend all relevant state and non-state actors for their interests and sacrifices in ensuring that this participatory process of public engagements, which are geared towards a better outcome for our law making, are smoothly executed. There is no doubt that various stakeholders will want their opinions heard by those in power. Indeed, this is a key element in democracy, especially when it concerns a vital issue like the national budget of a nation dealing with allocation of national resources. The proper use of the national budget is critical to the economic development of any country, and is even more so for a nation like ours, where our economy needs urgent stimulation to address our challenges. We understand that the budget is about fiscal targets, resource allocation, public expenditure, policy, productivity, and efficiency. We also understand that the process is one of passage, mobilization, and execution, as well as effective monitoring and evaluation. However, let me state clearly that the National Assembly will not tolerate attitude from government functionaries in all MDAs in relation to issues surrounding their defenses of submissions and our resolve to maintain the January to December budget cycle. I mean attitudes that are not in consonance with our zeal to the passage of budget, so that we maintain that cycle, our budget cycle of January to December of every year. The consequences may not be palatable for the official of the agency in the eventual passage of the 2024 appropriation bill. As the invited stakeholders and the committee settle down to this meeting, I urge you all to be open-minded, honest, and factual in your deliberations. We have to understand that we have a common goal, which is to drastically improve the socio-economic condition of our people in the shortest period with a budget of renewed hope. I appreciate the caliber of men and women that are here today, and I am confident that this retreat will be a productive one. On this note, distinguished colleagues, invited head of MDAs, other invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to declare the one-day retreat open. Thank you for listening.
On behalf of the Senate and our team, that is the Appropriation Committee, want to thank you very much for coming, and we hope that our gathering here will also enhance what we call this time around the renewed hope budget. That is why we're all here. Finally, I want to appeal to all the stakeholders, that is the three arms of government, particularly the executive and the National Assembly. We have decided to do our own, and that is to give you all the support to make this 2024 budget, which is the first for this government to succeed. It is the first step that matters, and the bulk of it depends on the executive. We, the legislators, for the first time now, have changed our rules to process this budget within the time of, I think, 2 weeks, according to our chairman, and that is before the end of this month. So we are assuring you that this budget will be ready for you to implement, inshallah, by the end of the month. So the ball is in your court.
Professor Ayo Teriba, in delivering the keynote address, reflected the huge potentials of Nigeria, but that deriving optimal benefits demands a shift from tax revenue to non-tax revenue.
It's my pleasure to be here at the invitation of the Senate Committee on Appropriation to come and make some reflections on the budget for 2024 as has been proposed, with a view towards identifying broad principles that will guide the amendments that are going to, or revisions that are going to lead to a more effective achievement of desired outcomes in 2024. Had opportunities to lead advocacy for Nigeria turning to its national assets as a way of making our budgets more effective in delivering outcomes. These are just a couple, of the opportunities I've had to be involved. I have watched very keenly the steps taken by the present administration from inception. On the 29th of May, I had also very keenly followed all the statements and utterances made by the administration. Everybody is not in doubt of the enormity of the challenges that the administration had inherited. And so it's in that context that I will be situating the comments I am making about budget and budgetary processes and the challenge of delivering improved outcomes in 2024. The first of my 4 points is 2023 outcomes versus 2024 proposals. So the Budget Office of the Federation and the Ministry of Budget and Plan has been very kind enough to provide us updates, how the 2023 budget has performed. They provided these updates in 2 stages. First, when the MTEF was proposed before it was eventually achieved. They gave us budget performance up to the end of July. And they were comparing the actuals with the amount that was approved in the budget. And they reported the percentage in which, it's been attained or it's been overshot or undershot. And those figures were quite instructive. For example, it said, it's contained insights about the revenue situation, about the realism of the revenue that had been assumed for 2023. Because unless the revenue you have achieved in 2023, that defines your realities, the fact. It's not what you intended. Unless 2024 aspirations connect with that reality, you may be building castles in the air. So my first point of departure is to look at the revenue attainment, the spending attainment, and deficit attainment in 2023. And then situate what has been proposed in 2024 for us to assess if these are realistic. And the proposed budget improved on the facts provided in the MTEF, in that MTEF ended the facts updates in July. The budget proposal has extended it to September. And the information that I think that has given us as a nation, which might be lost on many, is that the situation in July largely reflects the situation as the current regime met them. But the figures reported in September begins to show the kind of impact that the current regime is making on the situation. And it is the morning that shows the day. And based on that, it places us in a position to know how much of what's been proposed as revenue for next year are believable, and how much has been proposed as deficits are believable or as spending. Once I finish that, I'll then, address the second issue that has 3 parts: how to improve outcomes in 2024. Under which heading, I will look at, we need to keep striking the right chords. I'm of the view that the utterances of the president and the utterances of the economic team, in particular the utterances of the coordinating minister of the economy and the utterances of the honorable minister for budget and national planning, had been striking the right chords. They've been soothing, and they've lifted the hope that perhaps at last will solve the problems that we have been grappling with in the past 8 years that we have not been able to solve. So we need to stay on that message. But now that we are talking about the first full year budget of the administration, the first budget, not the first full year, we've done supplementary appropriation. This is our first budget. Then we have to move beyond those positive rhetorics. So rhetorics have been good, but the budget provides a test case how much of those good things that we are hearing will be done. So, and I make an issue of, okay, the current proposals, how much do they connect? How much are they translating? The right path that has been painted, how much are they translating them into budgetary realities? For example, to fund capital projects. And to the extent that the budget in the current state is still proposed, what are the windows of opportunity that we have in the engagements that we follow to try and raise the content in which we are not just, staying on rhetorics, in which we are actually now beginning to do what? To walk the talk. I know 1 month that we have for the revision is too little, but the point is, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So what are those 1 or 2 steps that we can suggest, to be, stated explicitly in the revised budget, that we raise, the effectiveness of our budget in achieving outcomes? And I want to close the third part of it, positive rhetorics, but now we have to move beyond rhetorics. And the third one is we need to become deal-oriented. So let me jump back into my view about revenue is that 2023 revenue attainment, as of July, revenue attainment fell about 20% short of what the budget had prorated for January to July. Specifically, we had only managed to raise 5 trillion, thereabouts, in revenue for the first 7 months, which creates a problem. Because unless your revenue aspirations are met, your spending aspirations will not be met. And it surprised me when the proposed budget came and I saw the updated figure in September to see that 20% gap has been closed. That revenue, prorated revenue aspiration January to September was not only met, it was slightly surpassed. That is significant. That for the new regime, within its first 4 months, has broken something that is a vicious cycle of we budgeting revenue and not being able to meet them. So since September, we met revenue aspirations, which meant that first 5 months, 5 trillion, next 2 months, close to 4 trillion. It's a new dawn. And I do think, that 2024 budget should say things about that. If that's how we finish 2023, we would be finishing looking very comfortable on revenue. And that means that the 18 trillion thereabout projected for next year are realistic. Because we've closed significant leakage in revenue, not least by the unification of the exchange rate. We may add subsidiary impact. And so, for the first time, at the beginning of this year, I questioned our ability to achieve the revenue. And I'm happy to stand here today to say that I noticed that although we were not achieving it up to July, by September we had. And I wish the president and the team well, that we keep seeing that kind of improvement. The second noticeable development is that This is also the first year in which the deficits actually incurred is less than the deficit budgeted. I noticed that even up to September, only 4 trillion has been incurred. And if you go by that run rate, instead of 10 trillion that we had expected will have been incurred by. So the government is saying we'll reduce deficit, and I think the narrative is that from the figures we have reduced deficits. That's good. Now the problem is that not getting those deficits, not incurring those deficits meant that a significant fraction of the capital budget is not achieved. By September, we had achieved only 1/4 of the capital budget. So you started the year by projecting about 6 trillion on capital spending. And that would have been about 30% of the budget. But by September, we had only spent 1.5 trillion, which is not 30% of the budget, it's actually 10%. Are we together? So that does not provide the premise for optimism about capital spending next year, unless we find new ways of financing the capital spending. And that takes me, therefore, to the rhetoric. The government has told us, or anyone that has cared to listen, that we are moving away from deficits. We are moving away from debt. We will raise equity. We will leverage assets. We will give opportunities to domestic direct investors to invest in assets. We will give opportunity to foreign direct investors to invest. These are positive rhetorics, the right chords to strike. And truly, if we do that, we will fund our capital spending 100%, if not 150%. So, and I'm saying that now the budget is here with us. And I get the feeling, that yes, we are saying we will spend on capital, we will concentrate on infrastructure, but we still stop short, of being specific about what we are offering the domestic direct investors. We've stopped short of being specific on what we are offering the foreign direct investors. And I'm saying that the budget proposal should offer us an opportunity to move beyond rhetoric. When are we going to take the first shot? What's that first shot going to be? I am urging that some of these should be allowed to be explicitly stated in the budget. That if we are saying we will leverage assets, which assets are we talking about? A lot of was mentioned on government-owned enterprises that underperformed the most in generating revenue, in making capital project spending, even in paying salaries. What are we proposing that we want to do to these government-owned enterprises so that they will behave differently in 2024? We should be explicit about it. Kenya is proposing to take 35% government-owned enterprises to the market, IPOs, to reduce their dependence on budget and to generate, some liquidity from the asset value. So what are we doing? We should be explicit, about it. Apart from government-owned enterprises, assets also include real estate. There is no MDA that does not have one choice real estate or the other that they own. And if you check, most of them are lying there idle. In terms of, if you look at the potential market value of the real estate and the value we are getting from the current use, everybody has something an asset that can be called upon, that can be used to attract investment, that can turn, our liquidities. Apart from real estate, I mentioned government-owned enterprises, and you've seen what Aramco, the Saudi is doing with Aramco. I've mentioned real estate, but I'll also mention infrastructure. Let's have 5 government-owned enterprises that we want to focus on and make more efficient. Maybe 5 choice real estate, maybe 5 infrastructure. It could be 50. It doesn't have to be 5. But let's be specific and say, okay, this is where we are going to offer domestic direct investors. This is where we are going to offer foreign direct investors. This is where we are going to do PPP. Or this is where we are going to issue diaspora bonds. So such specificity is the minimum that I may be asking for too much. And it's coming because I believe the sense of direction that the government has provided us. And I'm saying if we miss the 2024 budget train, we will not do anything about these things until 2025. Because I remember last year that when the 2023 budget was announced, the narratives coming out of it was, we owe 44 trillion naira, but it will rise to 77 trillion. So we spent the budget talking about what we owe, and we passed that budget. Within a month of passing the budget, our debt usual risk status was downgraded towards the default zone. But February 1, we launched MOFI. And we got told that MOFI has captured 18 trillion in assets. So we didn't talk about what we owned in the budget. We talked about what we owed and created bad publicity for ourselves. We could have situated that talk about MOFI, which we did 1 month later, in the budget. So that's what I'm saying, that don't spend this year's budget talking about what we owe. We inherited that. Everybody knew that we inherited 89 trillion. There's very little we can do about it. That the reason why we spend heavily on debt is that's what we inherited. We are creating positive narratives now about revenue, about deficit. Let's focus on what we own and how we can leverage what we own to solve the problems that confront us. Basically, that's, will be my counsel, that more be said in this budget about assets, and that clear paths towards securitizing the assets, be listed in the budget, and clear roadmap for doing so that the domestic direct investors would also take the challenge, and know, okay, this is what they're going to give for foreign. We know this is what finally. And this is in closing, that we need to become deal-oriented. If you look at the countries that are already walking the path that we are now about to start walking, by the way, most of them started seriously on the path only after 2015, when the global commodity prices collapsed, at the same time as we ran into income difficulties and, we ran into debt difficulties. But we kept talking about revenue and debt. We never mentioned assets. We never mentioned equity. They quickly started talking about assets and equity. And that leads them to a deal orientation. Every MDA needs to gain capacity for deal origination. That project that has been idle needs to be promoted by you to some platform. And so the country needs to create a deal room, an investment facilitation room or investment acceleration room, where government will de-risk, the specific projects. And then, as the third leg, foreign investors, domestic direct investors can come as on the deal consummation end. So you need to create an environment, not in which one agency of government takes the burden of managing the projects that we want to offer investors. Each agency of government should should understand the protocols for originating a deal. Is their deal. And then the role of government is to facilitate that process, to accelerate that process, to reassure investors that risks will be mitigated, and investors can begin to consummate the deals. And then we can begin to count the deals. Oh, we just counted, cross-border M&A deals. Oh, we just counted greenfield FDI arrival deals. Oh, we just counted PPP deals. And the more deals you count, the more resources you have available to ensure that your budgetary outcomes meets the desires of the government and of the people of Nigeria. So I know that the budget as proposed has the potential to renew our hope. These few remarks, suggestions made by me, was the end. We can make the assurance that our hope will be renewed, doubly sure. I thank you very much.
The issue of what we owe and what we own. I would like to get a clear perspective of what you mean by we should concentrate on what we own. Looking at what we owe will continue to follow us, and it becomes a liability continuously. So I want you to expatiate more on that.
I think that what accounted for the difference between the revenue experience up till July and the revenue experience after July were the reform measures announced by the current administration, in particular, the unification of the exchange rate, which ended a subsidy regime in the official foreign exchange market. So, forex sales prior to Naira per dollar and forex sales since the unification has been recovered at much higher than 400 Naira per US dollar. And if that's how we continue the journey forward, the privileged beneficiaries of that leakage are the losers for it. And the people of Nigeria, the government of Nigeria, are the gainers for it. So I think that's the source of improvement. And that's why it's likely to be sustained, till the end of the year. So you have the regime change in the revenue situation. How much of it you attribute to forex relative to pump price is debatable, because I do think that much of the game is coming from the forex, in that the importers of fuel also don't get subsidized foreign exchange anymore. They pay the full price, and that reflects. So how they recover it, becomes their business. That's my thought, and that's why I think that 18 trillion for 2024 is realistic. Then the tax generation. Now, since 2015, when global commodity prices crashed and have stayed that way, we needed to rely less on revenue from income Our GDP was about $600 billion US dollars in 2015, 580 specifically billion dollars. It's moved towards $400 billion now. So you have a declining GDP, but you are expecting an increasing tax from that GDP or an increasing revenue from that. It is unrealistic. Somebody, has to be. But when you look at similar economies who have better revenue than us, their revenue, and for example, UAE or Saudi Arabia, they're not looking for revenue from taxes. They have a tax-free environment. They are looking for revenue from assets. They're not taxing anybody. By the way, any tax does not improve the country's situation, because every tax is simply robbing Peter to do what? To pay Paul. It's a zero-sum game. It doesn't make the country better off. Okay? So it's redistributive. But non-tax revenue is a positive sum game. So you turn to assets that are idle and you seek to generate revenue from them. So that's why this narrative about domestic direct investment, about foreign direct investment, about PPP, have a positive. Now, it's not going to give us more tax revenue. It's going to give us more non-tax revenue. And so we will join the ranks, of the Saudis or the UAE, and actually enjoy comfortable revenue positions, because we are not taxing anybody. We are unlocking revenue from what we own, from our assets that are previously in idle. So if you broker another joint venture project, you successfully did LNG, that turned idle assets into foreign exchange inflow, into new revenue flows, into new employment, new growth source. You attracted FDI into GSM telephony. They created something out of nothing. So what other sectors are there? Rail is there. Rail can yield you far more than telecoms has yielded you. But the approach that worked in telecoms is to let investors come in, and they built nationwide network. Do the same in rail. Do the same in power transmission. Do the same to renew our real estate. Are we together? So we've been spending national time and resources doing annual finance act, looking for more revenue. And the more we look for more revenue, the less we find. Devote some effort to an annual investment act that seems to group, to begin to grow the list of assets that are fundable, and to create protocols in which any MDA can originate an investment deal, and that we have a national platform for facilitating, connecting those projects with foreign investors. That's what we mean by deal orientation. I'm not saying each MDA will take its own initiative. If you look at how India, which is the master of this, has done it, they have what they call the India Investment Grid. Every MDA can originate projects there. Every state, even private sector, can originate, and is led by their prime minister. Brazilian, they call it PPI, Partnership for Private Investment, similarly has such a deal. So they've captured thousands of projects, and they keep counting deal origination count, deal consummation count. We got X billion last week, we got Y. So that's the path in which Nigeria must now go. So I'm encouraging us that for all the efforts that we have expended on tax and tax and tax, let's try asset and non-tax revenue from asset. For example, the improvement in revenue since June when we unified the foreign exchange rate. Forex is the asset that we own. So we're not taxing anybody. We're just letting people have access to that Forex at market rate. So it's non-tax revenue. It's purchase, but you have to do it. We are not subsidizing your purchase of our asset.
Professor Teriba was my instructor at the Lagos Business School a few decades ago. And what he was teaching me is still what he's still repeating today. But I'm excited that he has been able to pinpoint where the challenge is. I've never had any doubt that we are going to get out of the revenue quagmire because of the team that we have that is leading this country. That team has proven by their track record that they are going to create an exponential growth for our revenue. And clearly that has happened. I will not be surprised in the coming year if even the figures that we are talking today is again doubled. And talking about what we owe and what we own, I think that the challenge that I see, for which I'm asking Professor to see whether he can tell us the way out, is that there has never been any question about what we own. What we have been using in the last few years is no more than revenue from one sector, the oil industry. And I think it is proving that we even have a lot more in the solid mineral sector, which is even untapped. So I've never had any doubt that when we begin to tap some of these things, we're going to have a lot more. So what we own is not a problem. We own a lot. But it's my considered view that the biggest challenge we have is that what we own, when we bring them out, does not stay here. A large chunk of what we own, when we harvest them, is filtered outside because we have not been able to come via local production and local consumption. That for me is a panacea for our problem as a nation. So I will be happy if my professor can tell us what is the way out. We have not been able to achieve this over the years. Thank you very much.
I just want to add that I'm very, very happy in respect to, in fact, everyone should be happy in respect of our performance in terms of our revenue target for 2023. I want to say here, I'm the happiest. I say so because what we have as our revenue target for 2023 was a product of collaboration between the executive and the legislature. When the executive in 2023 or 2022 brought forward his proposal in terms of revenue projection for 2023, the figure was less than what we have as a target. But our Committee on Finance did a very, very good work and was able to bring forward several items of revenue. Several items of revenue. And there was argument back and forth with Minister of Finance that there were not revenue that could be actualized. But later we agreed, both oil and non-oil revenues. And we agreed, to increase the revenue substantially. And now we are able to realize that revenue. So I'm very, very happy because then there was some cloud of doubt as to how we could realize that, the target. So one can see, because we've been saying it all the time, that the budgetary process is a collaborative process. a process that's built on dialogue and understanding, on negotiation. Now, if we had not given the room for negotiation in terms of the revenue projection at that time, the nation would have suffered because these revenues would not have been gotten. We would have not been able to harvest this revenue. So I am very glad because I was in front of that argument and I was supported by my chairman then, Committee on Finance. I was chairing Committee on Appropriations. He was chairman Committee on Finance, and we argued. Unfortunately, those that were there, were around, were not there, but one of them is here. And he was in front of that argument, the DG Budget Office. No, we can't realize this. They are not realizable. But now they've been realized. So over to you, Chairman Committee on Finance. You need to do more work. Look at loopholes, leakages that are there, revenue that can be, well, of course, the executive is not perfect. They are not perfect. They may not be able to see certain revenue items. So it's left for you to go around, check, use your own, your own capability to make sure that those revenues that the executive is not able to see, you should be able to see them so that we can harvest them and we'll be able to utilize them for the development of our country. Over to you, Chairman Committee on Finance. Thank you very much.
The area I want to actually make a comment is on the assets, because if we are going to place our assets as one of those bases for getting more funding, then we must also take a statistics of national assets that we have, which at the moment, I don't think it exists. You'll see most of the GOEs having their own assets and keeping them as if it's owned by them. But it's part of federal government assets. So there will be need for us to harmonize and get a national registry for assets. And secondly, again, when you look at the way revenues have been collected by most of the MDAs, where an MDA will collect revenue in October 2022 and still keep that revenue until November 2023 to present it in his books as part of revenue he generated. I think that's another area that we are going to seriously look at and make a legislation. And here, the point of single window, I think it's most appropriate for us to adopt for all GOEs and revenue generating agencies so that government will have to block more of the leakages that we have today. By the time we have a single window where everything, by the press of a button, you'll be able to know how much you've generated in January, in December, or in November, anytime, just a press of the button, you can get that, and I think we'll be able to make a headway.
I just want to add, in response to Professor Ladan's question, that there is a national integrated infrastructure master plan, which is in the custody of the National Planning Ministry, and it has over 19,000 projects. But what we have done is to commence meeting of all stakeholders in the infrastructure space, MDAs, Group of Public Enterprises, MOPI, Impraco, Infrastructure Bank, DMO, NIPC, to analyze them and take them to investment grade. Because even though they exist, they are listed, but there is no detailed work that has been undertaken to the extent that whenever an investor wants to invest, he will literally have to start from the ground zero. That's why in this 20th infrastructure projects development fund to bring some of these projects to investment grade, so that when investors ask, in fact, most of the time when Mr. President engage with investors around the world and domestically, they ask for investment grade proposals that are not equally. Mr. President had already given directive to the coordinating minister of the economy that all government-owned enterprises
can only maintain a revenue account which can only be debited by the authority of the coordinating minister of the economy and the accountant general of the federation. I thought maybe that will help in answering some.
I want to say on the issue of the asset.
Talking about what we own, this is a very important narrative, and I think it requires a lot of paradigm shift in our overall, scheme of looking at, our finances. Now, the point I just want to add here is, let us also remember when you say asset, we have both tangible and non-tangible assets. And immediately you talked about looking at what we own. In terms of the non-tangible asset, I was looking at the Japa syndrome, for example. Most of the people who are Japaing are our own trained human capital. They are not adding value to our economy here when they leave. They are adding value to other people's economy. So, since it is government investment through the training they receive, I think as part of this paradigm shift, it is important we take a look at this non-tangible asset, because many other countries are actually playing active role in the movement of their human capital to other countries with a view to getting something back in terms of their inflow. So I thought I should mention that.
Assets are like the talents you own. And some will say, I put it into use. I own 2, I gain 2 more. I own 5, I gain 5 more. Some will say, I buried it. I buried the talent. So the key problem, is to move from the group that buries their talents to join the group that profits from their talents. So for the assets, GOEs we've mentioned, and that's valid. Infrastructure we've mentioned, but there's also real estate. So somebody has said no asset register. So which is, do we even know what we own? And you'll be surprised how many countries doesn't know what they own. Then, if you know what you own, do you know the market value? Which is where it begins to profit you. So owning it and not knowing the market value is as good as not knowing it. Which is what Aramco did. Saudi took Aramco to the market in 2019. That's when it started benefiting from the asset value of Aramco. It's grown from 1.7 trillion to 2.4 trillion. So capital gains of 700 billion in 6-7 years. That's the thing about, I gained one more talent. Are we together? So the real estate, that when we can sweep them into a securitizable pool, like we swept our pension, assets, and we are benefiting from them, and establish their market value. Establish the market value of the companies. We don't have any company right now that has a market value. And therefore, we can't benefit from them financially. So that's the direction in which, that's the deal platform. So you need to migrate them to this deal room that establishes valuation, that tracks capital gains, and that ensures that we get more dividend, not just from LNG, which is not a government-owned enterprise, by the way. You list this as a government-owned enterprise, but it's a joint venture. Government is a minority owner. Investors own 51%. So you actually don't have any government-owned enterprise that pays you more than 5 billion, which is what Bank of Industry will pay you. Are we together? So we need to take them to the market like Kenya is taking them to establish their value and to begin to gain 1 more, to gain 2 more. And we need to take, for example, the Federal Secretariat. What's the value per square meter? What are we recovering from it? And if we could get an investment, invested direct investor, or to rebuild it into offices for people to lease and we earn rent from it, we will be the better for it. Thank you very much.
Professor Ayo Teriola Teriba for his beautiful presentation and providing answers to all questions and comments that have come forth, and your perspective that have been shared, most especially in the area of paying attention to what we own more than what we owe. We are taking it away from here today to at least build on it and work towards also emphasizing on what we own and how we can best put it to use. We want to thank you very much, Prof.
Mr. President made it unmistakably clear that he recognized the importance and the role and the independence of the National Assembly. He recognizes separation of power. He recognizes that members of the National Assembly are representative constituencies, and they expect, those constituencies expect them to represent their interest in programs, in policies, and he charged his team to give the maximum cooperation and respect. So I believe what we are seeing already in the two appropriations that have been passed since he was sworn in reflected that improved relationship. It is about trust and transparency. And I believe with that conduct, even the 2024 renewed hope budget will be passed with that confidence. With that, will benefit from that confidence. Secondly, it has been said by other speakers, particularly Professor Ayoteri, budget can only fund a portion of our requirement. Most of what we need to fund our requirement will come outside the budget. Our Agenda 2050, which is our long-term plan, long-term development plan, forecasted that to get to where we want to, in terms of $33,000 per capita by year 2030, we need to be investing $100 billion a year. And only 14% of that is expected to come from the public sector. Equally, in the first Federal Executive Council meeting, the Honorable Minister of Works presented roads that he had inherited, or the administration had inherited, about 18,965 kilometers of road, requiring almost 18 trillion. The NTA capital budget of 2023 is under 2.5, just about 2.5 trillion, and yet one sector. So it illustrates why the renewed hope budget is based on, as quickly as possible, restoring macroeconomic stability so that we'll be able to attract investors. And that benefited from the bold and courageous measures that were taken so far to deal with fuel subsidy, to deal with exchange rate, and additional revenue. And already we are seeing benefits of that. We are not where we want to be. And to get to where we want to be, we need to make best quickly. And luckily, all the ingredients are in place. A bold, courageous leader who has a great worldview and a National Assembly that has the experience and his team that are ready to work together.
Budget is a provision and assumption that all things being equal, this year coming 2023, we are going to achieve this based on this. That is why when the DSP turned to Senator Musa, that the task of raising the targets of the projections of the revenue to come in as highly burden on them. Because if you don't reach your target of projection and revenue coming in, what do you expect? The issue of budgeting is how much is coming in, how much you have to spend out. Then when it now comes to local economics, they have to now fund your deficits. Like all of us have had, that deficit between last year was pretty higher they won't exceed this year. Despite the fact that the capital budget this year is about 97% more than last year's own. That shows a lot of seriousness on the part of government and focus on the government. Because what we see, when you see a country making progress, it's not a amount of money you can consume as MPAs or how much salary you can pay. It's good to pay salaries, but the public, the over 20 million Nigerians are looking at the input of the government based on factors to be delivered. And we look closely into our economy, our payment now. The other thing that concerns the public now is inflation. How does this budget affect our economy? Luckily for us, the funding of our deficit has largely been pumped on multilateral and bilateral loans. So I don't put pressure on the Naira, on the local banks funding. So that they thereby use the room for the economy to grow on its own. So I want to commend and salute the courage of this committee for their wondrous role they are playing. The cooperation of the ministries, like Senator Bagudu said, leadership of the executive, they all pass with chambers at one time or the other. The executive have done the same thing. Senator Bagudu himself was a senator here, was my government member, when I'm chairman of the committee. So you cannot say he doesn't know what National Assembly and say you do. He won't have any fight between the senators and the ministry. Was a member of the Abuja committee about 15 or 12 years ago, so he has to reconcile that time with now. So since there's joint agreement that workability among themselves, it makes it easy. Budget can be passed in 3-4 weeks, like you said. Because before the end of this come to the National Assembly, you already work among yourself, you know where you are going, and I just said that everybody just sitting for the committees. So there's no point anybody going to that place and defining it. So I want to commend the additional by President Tinubu for this honorary tax and putting this nation on the map where he has been the chief marketing officer, which the president must be, because you must market your country. Like I think what you said, Ethiopia president said he won't talk anything bad about the country, but do about it. The first thing, if you say my child is a thief, nobody will come to your house. Say, don't, my son is a thief, nobody will come to your house. No wife will come and marry your children. So you have to cover that this my son can improve if you come to your house. That's why we're in this country. I salute and I want to encourage and pay tribute to the President, Senate President, and the National Assembly for this gathering and for this retreat. This is mainly for CSOs. And the CSOs, these are stakeholders too. I think we learn from this because sometimes we inform the public about the transactions, the budget process. Yesterday, I said the same thing at the Transport Committee that the synergy between National Assembly and the executive is a thing that must work together. The Constitution has put us together and made National Assembly a total of government to legitimize democracy in any country. I said, as far back as 14th century in Britain, there was crisis between the parliament and the monarch. They now agree that, look, we cannot give the sword and the purse to the monarch. You have one member to another person, another one. So they gave the sword to the monarch and they gave the purse to the parliament. Parliament, in this case, National Assembly, the sword in this case to the executive, thereby Mr. President.
It is a great boon to the nation to have the speedy processing, not just rubber stamping, but assisting to improve the appropriation bill draft that is put before them, but in record time, which means they are working day and night for the country. We do have a 27.5 trillion draft appropriation bill. In short, as you all know, it does lower the deficit to 3.88% of GDP from last year's estimated 6.1%. There's high capital expenditure as well, but the importance is that the direction of travel is to reducing the deficit, is to reducing the emphasis on borrowing, particularly foreign borrowing, capital market, expensive borrowing. And I missed Dr. Teriba's presentation, but I know him well, and I know his thinking, and it's the thinking of the world.
As I said, I've just come from the meetings in Dubai, and just yesterday evening, the IMF managing director, her opening statement was that with all the shocks that the world has suffered, Ukraine, climate incidents, COVID, which is effects are still being felt, that the fiscal space is exhausted. And we agree with that. I agree with that. Nigeria's fiscal space is exhausted. And the solution, as you probably heard earlier today, is that we have to focus on the concessional funding, the cheaper funding, the even free funding, and climate financing is the way. The deadlines and the targets are being missed. Nobody thinks that the 1.5 degrees limit on global warming will be met. They believe that the world will go higher in terms of the climate change. The outcome that is targeted will not be met, but still there has to be a battle to limit the damage. What that means is that there's an estimated $1.1 trillion per annum to be spent on climate change. Just yesterday, Dubai, UAE announced $30 billion for climate action. Another $1.5 billion was announced by another grouping. And what that means is that as we look to fund the 7.5 trillion budget this year, our first port of call must be the cheapest and the most concessionary financing, including climate financing. We ourselves, 3 days ago, we signed a 100 million euro direct investment, foreign direct investment, equity investment for reforestation in Cross River State, reforestation of the mangrove forest. And we have to look and search for as many of these types of transactions as possible. And of course, even our own budget indicates that there is room for privatization. There is room for maximizing our own assets without borrowing. And Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I think that's where we have to be brave, we have to be courageous, and we have to be innovative to make sure that we use the financial markets to take the stress, our fiscal stress down, to reduce our debt servicing, to reduce our emphasis on borrowing. And one of the ways, which I'll just quickly tell us, that is available, is that there are now countries and organizations willing to allow you to fund on the basis of their own credit rating. So if, for instance, we can borrow at, say, 9%, but they can borrow at 6%, we make an arrangement where we borrow on the basis of their own 6%, and we pay down at 9%. That too reduces your debt service, that improves your revenue flow. And so our participation, led by Mr. President, at these fora gives us the right to be at the table and to demand our own share of what is being made available to make the world better and to make the financial system stronger. So, on that note, Your Excellency, President of the Senate and Chairman of the National Assembly, distinguished senators, I would say that we need to very quickly make a point of optimizing what we have. The resources we have, particularly oil resources, are being, the world is turning in a new direction. Luckily, we too are turning to CNG. Just a few days ago, Mr. President launched our initiative on electric vehicles. Almost immediately, a major manufacturer of electric vehicles expressed interest and started discussions on producing electric vehicles in Nigeria. Such is the opportunity of our market here, and such is the attraction to others. So I think that's the way to go. Emphasis on equity, less emphasis on debt. We look forward to very successful and very speedy passing of the appropriation bill as deliberated on by the Senate and the National Assembly as a whole.
We, the civil society organization, we work as an independent monitoring and evaluation for transparency, accountability, and value for money network. Our purpose is to add value to the entire budgetary and the procurement system. We have been into it, we have been, but we really want to add more strength to it as it concerns to the budget. And we also wish to go to the field, take assessment for project verifications, project monitoring, inspections, and supervisions of the physical projects on ground, so that we also present an independent report for the exercise. Thank you very much.
Two observations I just want to raise, Chairman. The first one is on the key adoptions of the budget 2024. I think the strength of this budget is that the adoptions are very, very clear. 1.7 billion barrels at $70. I also look at the numbers of inflation. 21% for 2024. And 2025, we are talking of 20% inflation rate. And the hope is that by 2026, we lower it to 18%. I would like to call on the National Assembly to really be a bit more ambitious, Chairman, to make sure that we don't wait until 2026 to lower inflation rate to 18%. In fact, it should be next year as much as possible, because inflation erodes income and is taking toll on the cost of living. I'm happy the Minister of Finance is here as well. But then I was also happy that the Minister of Planning pointed this out, that we need to be more ambitious in terms of our budget. Brazil is budgeting $700 billion, with lesser population. It's highly commendable that we have raised the budget to 27 trillion naira from 18 trillion last year. But as that been disaggregated, it was about $40 billion. So budget per capita for 250 million people is still very low. And that's why I think all stakeholders should support the ambition of President Bola Tinubu, top of $1 trillion economy, in the next 2 or 3 years. But to do so, we need to raise the revenue. I agree with that, and I agree with Minister Waledu to say that the way to go cannot be borrowing, because EU goes are borrowing, goes sorry, as they say. So we have to all be aggressive to raise revenue very well. And it's not about taxation. But I also want to say so, the National Assembly is it's mostly the working people that pay taxes, pay as you earn. I think it's time for us to have progressive taxation to make sure that the wealthy pay also more taxes. You know, how we should lower the waivers that are being given to a couple of people. But even for personal income tax, I think we need to promote more literacy among the citizens, that nothing will be given if nothing has been given out as taxation. And that's why we need to promote tax literacy through aggressive sensitization to make sure that we get it done. Now, the last one is on the deficit financing. And I think the point has to be brought out. I went through the budget that one of the factors in the deficit financing is also the proposed increase in the salaries of the workers. And I think it's commendable that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has deferred to labor to raise the wages. So again, we need to be aggressive to inform, especially critical groups like labor, to see the linkage between this budget and their welfare. Now, critical sector allocations, and I agree very well with Senator Bagudu, highly commendable that the budget has raised the budget for education for health. Very, very important. But I think critical sectors should also go beyond the sectors we are recognized. I want to reaffirm here that the Ministry of Labour is at the heart of any recovery that we want to carry out, because all the issues are decided.
I must say that the attendance in this one-day retreat shows seriousness. It shows seriousness. It shows determination on the part of all stakeholders to make the 2024 budget the first full budget of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu a great success. So on a very serious note, I believe we are on the right track. So the chairman of the Committee on Appropriation, chairman of the Committee on Finance, my brother Sani Musa, thank you. I thank both of you for putting this together. So far, it's been a great success. But the icing on the cake will be the implementation of the budget itself. My message is very simple. Revenue drive, and revenue drive. We cannot achieve much unless all the revenue agencies rise to the occasion. So no matter how beautiful the budget is, if there is no money to spend, the budget will not work. So I think that's the main message that I have. Let's gear up and go out there, plug the loopholes of leakages and wastages, and then bring more revenue so that the 2024 budget will become realistic. I must also say that even from the action of the minister today, he has already answered a key question. Can we do it? Can we pass the budget in record time? The National Assembly, both the House of Representatives and the Senate, we are very determined. And then we want to make sure that we continue with the January to December budgetary cycle. But a lot depends on the ministers, the MDAs, and the revenue spenders. If you don't come on time to defend your estimates, there is no way we can pass the budget on time. But we are prepared to ensure you do that. And the chairman of appropriation, it will not be right to give them zero in the budget if they don't turn up. I'm plead with him to try to bring them. So, Honourable Minister, we expect you to come as many times as possible. I'm not saying drag them, I'm saying bring them so that they can have something in the 2024 appropriation. Because the starting point of the success of any administration is budgeting. And the most important aspect is the revenue drive. We have to spend what we have. We cannot spend what we do not have. So on that note, I want to thank all of you for participating in this retreat, and I assure you of the determination of the 10th National Assembly under my leadership to ensure that we think of the Nigerian people first, and we budget for the Nigerian people, and we make the laws that will favor the Nigerian people, and we collaborate with the current administration's determination to succeed. And our prayer is that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu
will, just like it laid the foundation of success in Lagos, this foundation will start with this budget, and Nigeria will change for the better. Amen. Amen. Can we shout a loud amen? Now, for me to go back to my seat, that I'm happy that we all turn up. I'm happy that we are all here. I'm happy that we have seen the seriousness of budgeting. I'm happy that we have seen the seriousness of starting the 2024 with the mirage of problems we have in Nigeria, the challenges already confronting us with seriousness, which starts from here. I'm happy about that. And I know that we will undertake proper oversight, not just from the National Assembly, but also from the civil society organizations. So I think this is the beginning of success. We have taken a step in the right direction, and God will guide us.
In the course of the retreat, President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, called for the observance of a minute silence in honor of victims of the drone misfire on civilians at Sudunbiri community in Igabi local government area of Kaduna State.
Finally, just where you are aware, Honourable Minister, there was a slight mishap in Kaduna where a drone mistakenly dropped a bomb in the wrong place, and a lot of people lost their lives. So I urge all of you to rise and let us pay a minute silence on behalf of the dead. May the souls of our brothers and sisters who lost their lives in the tragic incident, very unfortunate incident in Kaduna through a drone mishap, rest in perfect peace. Thank you.
It is very important that we all work together to ensure that we return this budget as soon as possible, so that the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria can sign it into law by 31st of December of this year, and it can come into operation from 1st of January of 2024. But that largely depends on all of us. We need to work together to get this done. Once again, on behalf of the Senate Committee on Appropriation, we want to thank you for coming and spending quality time with us.
This synergy between the two arms of government is in the short term targeted at quick passage of the budget. Among chief executives that attended the retreat is the Director General of the Nigerian Television Authority. And that is the size of our package. We thank you for watching. I'm Lami Ali saying bye for now.